the onus is on us or on the organization to be reaching out in a meaningful way.
In a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And in a way that's personal to our organization.
Right.
What I find is if we're a symphony and we put online our performance of Beethoven's Fifth, and there are 300 other Beethoven Fifths out there,
right.
What's really special, or what builds the relationship between the viewer and us? And that's why I'm interested in these town hall meetings, which is our speaking about our concerns, what we're planning to do. Why I'm interested in organizations talking about their future plans. What's the amazing art you would like to bring a year from now or 2 years from now? Let's make people excited in our community about what we're going to bring to our community. Let's talk about the arts education programming we plan to do, we want to do going forward, so that people have a sense not just of the constraint of today, but of our vision for the future. That's what I think is going to draw people to us, dealing with it. And here's our plan for the future. What questions do you have? And letting people ask questions and interact in a way that a lot of times people don't have a chance to do with their arts institution. And I think people would really like to know how much great planning is going into our cultural organizations right now. My organization offered a free hour of consulting to any organization in America that needed it over the last month, the last 6 weeks.
Wow.
We did 427 hours of these calls to 427 organizations. And what was astonishing to me was how well our arts leaders have dealt with this crisis, how maturely, how smartly, how quickly and thoughtfully they've dealt with a very, very sudden attack of no earned income. And I think our patrons should hear this. I think they would be fascinated and impressed by how quickly organizations, both large and small, and it's the smallest ones that are the most impressive to me, who jumped onto PPP loans, got their bankers to get approval, got a local foundation to get them an extra grant, got their gala online, got people to forgive their season tickets, the portion that hadn't been shown yet, and did all of this with such great skill and timing, and allowed them to get through this first phase, and then talk about what the plan is for the next phase and the challenges there, and let your community understand this. I think that's so important and so much more potent than showing another performance online.
Yes, certainly sounds that way. In fact, Deborah Borda talks about that in the interview that we did with her. She talks about how she had pretty much the entire board of directors on a Zoom call way back at the beginning.
And that's been common. And now I'd like to see it broaden beyond the board to major donors, to your major subscribers, to people who've been supporting your organization for 20 years. You can parse the groups how you wish. But doing this, I think, is really important at this time. And it's something that we're going to have to keep doing over the next year or so as we wait to bring everyone back together again.
Mm-hmm. It's hard. It sounds like tough love, the idea of having some organizations just kind of shut down temporarily.
Temporarily. That's, to me, a better situation than shutting down forever, because if you run until September or October and now you run out of money and you just say, that's the end, bye. I'd rather be a planned hibernation than a forced closure. And I'm very hopeful that very few organizations will shut down permanently in this pandemic. I'm hopeful that we can not lose so many. Our country is so blessed to have this quilt of such diverse and interesting and varied organizations who enrich our lives. And it would be such a loss to lose big chunks of these numbers of groups. So I would like organizations to handle this time very carefully so that we can continue to benefit from their great art.
Good advice. Good advice. And it is a little like tough love, but it sounds right.
It's really tough planning. And when the pandemic struck and when all of a sudden everything shut down from one day to the next, we had no time to plan. So we had to react instinctively and hopefully smartly. But now we have a little bit of time to plan. And so now we really have to think through not just the next 3 months or 6 months, but really the next 18 months or 24 months, and think through what is going to be our pathway through this time. That to me is critical.
Right. So this whole idea of, oh, well, maybe we'll open in October or maybe November or gee, maybe January. Your
No one
advice,
knows. Nobody knows.
right. So
Nobody
what we
knows. But everything I hear is it's going to be a year at least before we have a vaccine. Maybe they'll come up with a cure earlier. But I don't think that right now, if you opened up our theaters and said you can play, I'm not sure a whole lot of our artists would want to interact with each
right,
other in such close quarters, and that our audiences would want to enter into our theaters without some assurance that there was going to be a safe environment. I think that's going to take some time, but I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to, when it comes back, I think it's going to come back with a bang. I don't think it's just going to be still people saying, well, I don't know, my whole life has changed. I never want to go back into theater. People said the same thing after 9/11. They said, no one's ever going to go to New York again. No one's going to want to go into skyscrapers again. That's not what happened. People come back to the patterns that enrich their lives. Coming into the theater enriches people's lives. They're going to come back into the theater. It's just a question of when they feel safe to do so. And I don't think they will until they feel safe to do so.
right. So it kind of makes sense to simply plan for hanging tough for another
That's
8
true
months.
for most organizations. Now, some organizations have so little earned income, even when they perform, that they can afford to socially distance in a theater, or they can afford to do something out of doors. There's some organizations which are planning out of doors performances where people can be socially distanced. So what I'm saying is not true for every organization, but I think it's true for the majority of organizations.
Right. Wow. So we talked about what people need to be thinking about for each of the phases. And was there anything else that occurred to you that we should be having folks thinking about?
Well, one thing I would love to see happen is I would love to see a national government-led effort to really think through the money that's going to be required to keep our art sector alive and healthy. And I am afraid that may not happen. We got the $75 million for the NEA, which is great, but not very much.
Right.
Americans for the Arts estimates the problem at over $4 billion. So the 75 million really is lovely, but not substantial. And I think that it would be wonderful if we could have some kind of national effort to really save our arts. Our funders have reasonably really focused on their own locality. So a group of foundations get together in New York, for example, to help New York organizations. That's completely understandable. But I would hope that it's not just in the largest cities and with a certain group of organizations that get help through this period. Again, we have amazing organizations in every state of this country. And it would be a shame to see some locations not survive because there wasn't a group of foundations in that community who could support
So, Michael, we need to get you down to before Congress.
them. Before the empty Congress with no one
Yeah.
sitting there. Obviously the problems facing our nation are huge, and the arts to me are critical, but they're not the only problem facing this country. And so, but it needs to be part of the solution. And I think one of the things we've observed in this pandemic is how much people turn to entertainment for solace, for entertainment, for inspiration during the country's darkest times. And I think what we've proven our worth in these last 8 weeks. And I think we need to stake that claim and try and create a sensible national platform for helping to save the arts in this country.